Good evening, everyone. My name is Elisheba O'Day, and I am a medical student at the University of Illinois College of Medicine at Peoria. Thank you so much for joining us and for arriving camera ready and for also keeping your cameras on. We really appreciate it. We are so happy to have you. This ophthalmology virtual programming series is brought to you by UEComp's Ophthalmology Student Interest Group and Sharing the Scope, a medical student-run initiative sharing OphthoScoop with all aspiring ophthalmologists, especially medical students who do not have home programs. Today's session, I matched into ophthalmology without a home program, so can you, is part of the Building Our Toolkit panel series. Our hope is that we all take away tangible tools that we may leverage on our way to match into ophtho. Before we get started tonight, I would like to extend a warm greeting and thank you to all of our esteemed panelists and to all of our attendees. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedules to be with us tonight. Here is our agenda. So we just had our welcome. In a second, we'll have an introduction of each of our wonderful panelists. We'll move on to the prepared question segment, and we will end with the audience Q&A. Before we start the panelist bios, can Aaliyah please introduce herself? She is one of the organizers of this event.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaliyah McCalla. I am a second-year medical student at Central Michigan University, and I'm very passionate about entering ophthalmology, so I'm very excited to engage in today's session and hear from each of the panelists, especially the student who goes to a school without an ophthalmology program. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Cecilia?
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I'm an M1 at the University of Illinois here in Peoria, and I'll be introducing our panelists today. So I think we can get started. So we have Dr. Schmuter, who's a PGY1 at Weill Cornell Ophthalmology in New York City. She received her medical degree from City University, New York School of Medicine. She also enjoys mentoring medical students and skiing, collecting shoes, and exploring the food scene in New York City. We also have Dr. Quintana, who is also a PGY1 at Weill Cornell Ophthalmology in New York City. He received his medical degree from Meharry Medical College. And in addition to a love for eyes, he also enjoys producing music. We have Dr. McSwain, who's a PGY1 at Georgetown Ophthalmology. She received her medical degree from Florida State University School of Medicine. Dr. McSwain is a lover of all things health, fitness, and medicine. She uses her social media page to share resources, and during, and during the pandemic, she used her social media platform to launch a fundraiser, motivating many to give back. We also have Dr. Bilal Ahmed, who's a PGY2 at University of Iowa Ophthalmology. He is the brainchild behind Honestly Bilal, a place where aspiring ophthalmologists share their stories and provide infinite amounts of information. We also have Dr. Haris Ahmed, who's a PGY3 at Loma Linda University Eye Institute. Dr. Ahmed graduated from Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine in New Mexico. During his time at BCOM, he was an active member of the community, and his advocacy earned him many awards and time on Capitol Hill. And we also have Dr. Brown, who is a chief at New York Eye Near Infirmary of Mount Sinai. He attended medical school at the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Peoria and matched on the East Coast. Next, he is headed to Bascom Palmer Eye Institute for a fellowship in surgical retina. Dr. Brown is a talented musician and spent time at the world-renowned Juilliard School. And he is currently on backup call, so he might be jumping in and out if he needs to. But thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Cecilia. That was awesome. So now we're going to begin with the prepared question portion of our session tonight. I kind of grouped the questions into five or six themes around background, application, research, away rotations, and mentorship. So we will begin with our first question. Where and when did your ophthalmology story begin? Please tell us your aha moment in medical school that led you to ophthalmology.
I can go ahead and jump in. So I actually had no idea that I wanted to do ophthalmology. I went to medical school thinking that I wanted to go into cardiology or medicine, and that all changed when I started my third year. My first rotation of third year was in surgery, and I loved being able to do stuff with my hands. I loved being able to treat people almost instantly. And so I knew I wanted some sort of subspecialty in surgery to pursue. So I went down the path of finding all the other surgical subspecialties. I tried ENT for a little bit, but there was definitely something missing. I wanted faster things. I wanted more interaction with patients. I wanted long-term care of patients. And then I actually had a colleague who was a year above me that had just matched ophthalmology and recommended it when I was halfway through third year. So I randomly had the opportunity to do an outpatient clinical rotation in ophthalmology, and day one I loved it, and it's history. So that's how I got involved.
I could jump in next. So I actually kind of started figuring it out in my first year of a medical school, but very intentionally. So my medical school is pretty new. We don't really have like home departments and a lot of different fields. So when I was a first year medical student, I was thinking, oh my goodness, like what if I wanted to do something like really challenging to enter, but I don't have a home department, and how in the world am I going to do that? And plus there are some fields like ophthalmology, like ENT, dermatology, where people say, you really don't get much exposure to it at all in medical school. Even when you're a third year or fourth year, you're very lucky actually if you get exposure to these fields in third or fourth year. And by that time, it's very complicated because you're like about to apply. So then it's like a whole mental gymnastics of figuring out how to apply later on when you don't have a home program and all these things. So when I was a first year, I just didn't know any ophthalmologists, but I emailed a bunch of different fields that I thought I might be interested in. Like Kia said, like I kind of wanted to do something with my hands, like a surgery type of field. I knew I would see at least like general surgery throughout medical school. So I just emailed some ophthalmologists, ENTs too, and different subspecialists and shadowed them. A lot of them are actually very amenable to shadowing for a day or two, even in the OR, especially if they're private practice. I think they have like looser restrictions in terms of OR access and having outsiders come join them into the operating room and so forth. So it's hard to know, right? Like when you're first year of medical school or second year, but you maybe have like a gut feeling and then start working towards it. And then you could always change your mind, but you could at least start working on it earlier on.
Hey guys. So I became interested in ophthalmology, I think, probably at the beginning of my third year of medical school. I was actually interested in neurosurgery before that. And so I wanted to do something in neuroscience. And I got the chance to see my first vitrectomy during my third year on a week-long ophthalmology rotation. And I think that was kind of the spark. I think that's really what you want to be looking for when you're thinking about, specialty, or even within ophthalmology, what kind of excites you. I mean, it's what's that spark that kind of gets you interested. And so I started to, reach out to mentors, started working on some research projects. And I was, kind of aggressive about writing to attendings, trying to get them, talking to people. How do you do this? How do you do that? I think I spoke to a lot of attendings, and I think showing your interest is a good thing. So if you guys are interested and you're coming from, a program without that home institution, it's always worth like writing an email and seeing if you could shadow someone and talk to them about your interest.
Dr. Ahmed, would you like to share your aha moment?
Yeah, I think if you go to a school that doesn't have an ophthalmology department, it's hard to know if you want to do it because it's such an isolated field. So in my case, I was fortunate to be exposed to it as an undergrad, so I kind of knew of it, and I knew for me, I wanted to do surgery, but I was worried about the lifestyle that comes with most of the surgical fields in residency and as an attending. So I spoke to different surgical subspecialists, and every single time I ended with the conclusion that ophthalmologists were the happiest surgeons. So that was really important to me. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we sit for our surgeries, they're faster, there's a lot of cool technology involved. And so those things were all appealing to me.
Thank you. Dr. Brown and Dr. Schmuter already spoke to this, but if anyone has anything else to add, once you decided on ophthalmology, how did you get exposure to the specialty?
So the way my home program worked was that when you chose an elective, you would work with an outpatient private doctor who was willing to take students and teach them. And so I went to my school had community campuses all across Florida, and I went to our Sarasota campus, and there was fortunately an ophthalmologist that had taught several years of students who went into ophthalmology. So I actually reached out to him prior to my rotation to see if there was any research projects to get on early on before I even started my rotation. And then also if he was willing to take me by the hand and introduce me entirely into the field of ophthalmology, since I had never been exposed to it before. So like Gabby said, emailing really helps get your foot in the door, especially when you have no experience with ophthalmology, and just having fun when you're there and taking everything day by day. So that's how I was able to find a little opportunity.
Thank you. I know as med students, sometimes we're nervous to send out emails, but hopefully after tonight, we'll have some more courage. What advice would you give to your M1 self?
Send that email. Send the email. I'm telling you, like, everyone's been there. I think all of us, like everyone who's coming from like a smaller program or a new program or a program without a home department for ophthalmology, we've all kind of had to go through this same, there's like an activation energy, I think, at the beginning with trying to even get into ophthalmology. Like in terms of even getting connected with someone in the field, like that's the first step, right? Everything after that is like a domino effect. Like you start doing research, you meet people, you make connections and things like that. It starts snowballing. But in the beginning, it's like super hard because you're like, who in the world do I reach out to? I don't know anyone. Like, how in the world do I meet, like, shadow an ophthalmologist or do research or any of this? So yeah, I would say, just send those emails, like obviously try to write them as tactfully, not too long, like send your CV, try to like, demonstrate your sincere interests in the particular line of research that they are doing and so forth, and know who you're talking to, and be able to, go in person if you need and so forth, if possible. But just kind of that initial courage, like you describe, Sheba, to just take that leap, ultimately will get you eventually through that door. And then the rest is kind of history. It's a lot easier, I think, after that first step.
If any of you guys could go back in time, what advice would you give to your M1 self?
I would say have a little more fun in med school, just a little bit. It's really tough. It's super stressful. I think I spent my first 2 years, like, every weekend I was just studying the whole weekend nonstop. You become kind of almost like a machine, and it's important to keep those things that, keep you who you are, the essence of who you are, because that's what you're going to be also talking about in your personal statement. Everybody who's applying to ophthalmology has the, great test scores and great letters of recommendation, and what makes you kind of stand out. What do you enjoy doing? What are you passionate about? Those are kind of the bigger questions. And aside from research, what else are you going to talk about during an interview when you get to that next stage, when you're applying? So yeah, develop other interests. Try and see if you can integrate them into what you're doing in medicine too. I mean, I have a background in classical music, and I spent the first 2 years of med school, along with studying, working on a project where we were kind of integrating music and medicine. And I can talk more about that if you guys are interested, but it actually wasn't directly related to ophthalmology, but during my interviews, I ended up talking about that during most of my interviews. So it's important to keep doing those things that you guys enjoy while you're studying, really hard.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. You know, I think you should enjoy the process because you're only a medical student once, and when you're done, yeah, you can get down. That's my daughter. And then once you're done with medical school, you know, you look back and you kind of look at it favorably. And so try to enjoy the steps, and then definitely try to find unique characteristics that'll set you apart. They don't have to be spectacular necessarily. Like, for example, I was an extra in a movie during my second year of medical school. It was really random, but it came up in every single interview. And it was something that they remembered me by because, you know, like Jeff said, like everyone has test scores, research. So if there are some nice, interesting things that they can talk to you about that they'll remember you for, I think that's just going to help you when they discuss you as a group in an interview setting. They can remember you. You know, you're the musician, or you're the guy who's an extra in a movie, or you know, run a education account or something.
100% agree. Everything that they said, your hobbies come up the most during interview season, and that's how people recognize you, and that's what impresses people sometimes. Just last week, I met with an interviewer that I interviewed with at Georgetown, and our classes are pretty big. We have 6 residents each year, and we were at some random dinner, and he was like, "Hey, I remember you. You're the one that plays volleyball." And I used to play volleyball a lot in high school, and I did some intramurals in college and in med school. So just like random stuff like that. Don't give up your hobbies, your sports, your passions. You can get really carried away during M1, M2, and even M3 year, but when you have time, just say yes to that, like pick up basketball game or pick up your paintbrush again if you're an artist. So yeah.
Yeah, just kind of adding to that, like it makes sense because at the end of the day, you know, everyone who's you just want to work with people who you could relate to, and they're having fun and they enjoy what they're doing and they love life. And, you know, you want people who you can kind of talk to and relate to every day when you're working with them. So I think that on the interview trail, for all those reasons, like they want people who are just passionate about what they're doing every day and, have a life outside of medicine and their own interests and so forth. So at the end of the day, like Jeff said, like everyone kind of has a lot of things in common at an interview day in terms of like the logistical standardized things that are required as part of your application. But we're people. There's more to us than those like board scores and all these things that we do throughout medical school.
I hope that encourages us all to plan some time for self-care and our self-interest in the coming days or weeks. What did you all do during your summer between first and second years? And what would you recommend that we do during that time to improve our applications?
So for me, my school, Florida State, had a summer research program, and a lot of kids either signed up for that, traveled, or became anatomy lab TAs. So I didn't have the money to travel, and I was not interested in getting back into the anatomy lab. So I decided to sign up for the summer research program. And I found a local researcher in my community in my hometown and did around 8 to 10 weeks of research of lab-based basic science research during that time that I had off. So there's a lot of different things that people do. And if you can do something that you love to do and have fun and stay home, do it. Travel if you want to, be a TA if you want to. That time is really, really precious because that's one of the last times you're going to have a big chunk of time like that off. So I would say, if you haven't already, enjoy it and figure out a plan that'll not only make you happy, but can also add to your application if it can.
I think I agree with what you said too. Definitely enjoy it, your last big break. I think in the post step 1 being pass fail era, if you come from a school like I did where there's no ophthalmology program in the state, let alone my school, the challenges are you don't have access to networking, letters of recommendation, and research opportunities. So step one used to be a way to kind of, equalize a little bit for us. We could show that, we can score high on this test and we're comparable to other applicants. With that being gone, those intangibles are really important. So that summer does represent a good opportunity for you to start building networking, whether that's your nearest ophthalmology department, social media, your state ophthalmology society, or cold calling local ophthalmologists. Maybe if you can dedicate a certain percentage of that summer towards using those different avenues I just listed to bridge the gap that you have by not having a department, so you can start getting research, networking, and then eventually a letter. I think that's something that I would recommend, which is a new thing, which I didn't say previously when step one was scored.
Yeah, I agree completely with like everything that was just said, essentially, that I think now that step one is pass fail, it does complicate things a little bit more than when we all applied, in the sense that as he described, like you have to distinguish yourself more with the intangibles. Yeah, but nevertheless, I still feel like that summer, it's a balancing act between enjoying it but also trying to be productive to some extent. I think it's like a very case by case basis. I think if you're able to very efficiently, depending on your program, kind of do these things during the school year, then maybe you could just enjoy your whole summer, like good for you. You should go and travel or hang out with friends. And, I think it's a very case by case basis where you look at your own kind of review of the past year in M1 and so forth and say, did I get like some research stuff? Did I get to meet someone? Like, did I get kind of kick started in this process? Or do I really have like everything still ahead of me and I should probably use the summer wisely to get on that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, just echoing what some of the others have said, it's your last kind of summer ever. So I would enjoy it, but, I would start planning. You're thinking, okay, maybe I'll contact, this attending I'd like to work with. Maybe they know so-and-so, maybe there's a research project I can get involved in while I'm maybe doing some traveling, or kind of balance what you're doing. I think that the earlier you get involved and the earlier you kind of, start to get to know people, the better. But at the same time, I would try to balance that with enjoying really what is your last summer.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the application theme. How did you best prepare your residency application? What parts of the application do you think are most important and should be handled with the most care?
In terms of importance, I would say your personal statement and your hobby section, at least for ophthalmology applications, are some of the most important ones off the bat.
Yeah, I would actually say doing really well in your clerkships is important. Those same skills that you get from your third year when you're in surgery, when you're in medicine, taking care of patients, those are the same skills that you're going to need, every day in ophthalmology. I think, really getting that solid foundation in medicine and surgery, really important. You want to do well in those clerkships. Aside from clinical training, I think, developing, your other interests. If you have an interest in research, developing that, talking about that, knowing your research projects before you go into an interview, because you're going to get asked, hey, on that one paper that you did, why did you guys think, this was that way in the conclusion, or whatever. They'll ask you something. So knowing that, whatever you put on that application, you got to be able to talk about it. You got to know it. But that being said, I think the personal statement, being able to articulate exactly why you want to go into ophthalmology, and just, showing people that you're basically, applying for a job for, that you're reliable, you're trustworthy, you care about patients. Those are all important qualities.
Yeah, I will add, like, just because this is like the theme of this Zoom, essentially, that I actually did add in my personal statement within the context of the story that I came from like a new medical school without a home program. I think it does contextualize your application to an extent. You were seen, I believe, in a different lens from, interviewers who recognize the challenges that are intrinsically involved with not having a home program or being from like a new school. Like, you don't have the same resources and opportunities as people who do have like robust ophthalmology programs at their institution. It's just, I feel very strongly about that. It's like case in point. And I think a lot of interviewers, when I interviewed, really recognized that if they were able to either interview people from the past who also came from that sort of route and so forth. So that's just like a tidbit that I think not everyone, like, and it's okay, like you don't have to include it, but I think it is like a point that is meaningful to kind of add into your process there. In terms of like the planning, I think thinking about how to put your residency application together is like very daunting, right? It's like this huge thing where everything seems very important and there's so many different components of it. And I really felt like just breaking it down, right? Like with any big task, like very systematically be like, okay, what are the parts of the application? Like Google it, like what are the parts from SF Match or whatever, just list them. And say over time, like, how can I just one thing at a time work towards this part of the application? Like some things like you'll do automatically, like boards and clerkships, like that's just part of the process. But over time, I think if you work at each section a little bit, it'll come together. Like really, there was a point like towards the end of the medical school, as it should, that it really felt like it was coming together. It wasn't like me inorganically putting it together. It was like a natural conclusion. So I think thinking about it early as soon as you can, but then slowly gauging your application towards it is a nice way to not be overwhelmed at the end when it's due.
You all spoke to how your passions, whether it be volleyball or music, came up during the interview trail. Can you speak to what else stood out in your applications, or maybe what was your wow factor as an applicant?
It's interesting. During residency, and I've now gone through fellowship interviews, a lot of those discussions were about music. It's kind of funny. I think it's really important to be able to articulate those other interests. I also think that whole idea of a wow factor, I think it's important to have something that distinguishes you. What is it that what are you offering that kind of makes you unique as an applicant, and can you talk about that? Can you articulate it? I think that's the way I would maybe look at it, and that kind of goes back to like, what are you passionate about? I mean, we're all aspiring doctors, so we went into medicine for a reason. What is that reason? I would think a lot about that too. I mean, you guys have come so far already. It's about developing those ideas and kind of translating them and how that fits into ophthalmology.
I think for me, like on my application, advocacy was something that I got involved in with my state societies. I helped work with them to kind of lobby for bills and write talking points and create like little student committees that would call legislators and committee members and say, we support bill A or B for point X, Y, and Z. And the fact that I was able to do that, it's a little bit unique. It gave me an opportunity in the interview setting to become the expert in the conversation, versus when you talk about research or ophthalmology with these people, they're the experts by default because they've been doing it for so many years. If you can do something like advocacy or music or whatever that's unique, that allows you to demonstrate your passion and expertise on a topic, and you can show your ability to communicate something that's separate from ophthalmology in a passionate way, I think it comes across very nicely. So whatever that unique thing is, I think if you can just kind of discuss it passionately and not obviously like you don't want to sound crazy, but if you can just kind of talk about it, I think that'll look nice and you'll stick out and you'll be unique as well. I'm changing a diaper, by the way. Apologize.
Yeah, for I think my wow factor, I did a lot of art growing up in high school. I presented at a few art shows and I love to paint. And during the pandemic, I kind of brought all of my painting skills back out and published a few pieces in magazines and on websites. And I actually put a little link to one of my paintings in my application. And during the interview, some of my interviewers were pulling up the pictures and we were talking about them and talking about my inspiration. So just little things like that. Like a lot of people are artists. Being able to share your art with an interview is really, really an interesting experience, and it's quite unique. So and it's just something that I love to do. So it wasn't that hard to share. So it could be something as simple as I love to draw and here's an example of it, or I do pottery on the side, or I love to cook. But yeah, I would say that was my little wow factor.
I think for me, I had a lot of like a bunch of publications that weren't research, but they were publications like editorials and like letters to the editor. Like, I think those are often overlooked. Like, you can write things that are actually considered publications on the actual interview, whatever, residency application, but they're not like formal original investigations done in research and so forth. They're more like editorial pieces, opinion pieces, magazine articles, like all these different things. And I've done a bunch of them and collaborated like through social media and virtually with different ophthalmologists across the country. So I think that's a very good way to like network too. You meet different ophthalmologists, you can write something up with them, and then it's like an interesting piece, you're getting your name out there. And so it's a lot of fun too. And a lot of them are on like medical education. You know, we were in medical school, we went through the medical education system. Like, we have very valid opinions about medical education at large. So I think that's a good kind of avenue to explore too, especially if you're interested in like that type of writing or medical writing or opinion pieces. It's like fun to do.
Thank you. I'll ask one more of the application questions and then we'll move on to research. How did you speak about academic failures or hardships in your application?
What's going on, y'all? I just want to introduce myself. My name is Quintana. I'm a resident at Cornell. Coming in late, was on call, had a long day. But I guess I can answer this question. I think, honestly, you shouldn't put something in your application that you're not ready to talk about. I mean, other people may have different opinions, but if there's like something like really bad, like you can address it. But at the same time, like you also don't want to shoot your own self in the foot, right? So just be like strategic and smart about what you put down, because the interviewer and the committee may have noticed it, but by the time you get an interview, then they probably won't care or overlook that portion of your application.
I agree. Just simply put, if there's something glaring on your application that needs to be addressed, or you're taking a few years off, go ahead and talk about it. But if there's, you don't have to have perfect grades, I don't think, to match into ophthalmology, but you don't have to address that you're not a perfect applicant, because no one is. Everyone's going to have a flaw or something lacking from their application. So highlight the things that are your highlight spots. What are you good at, and show that part off. You don't have to really highlight your weaknesses, I would say.
Moving on to research. Can each of you please speak to the research projects you participated in during medical school and what stage those projects were at when you applied to the match?
For me, like Gabby, I really like what she said about non-clinical stuff and like the uniqueness and importance of it. So I also did stuff on medical education. Like as a DO, there's a lot of things related to accreditation and our licensing that I care about, that I wrote about. And then I did, your usual kind of case report stuff too. But I would say like the number doesn't matter as much as just like the quality of the projects and the fact that you started and completed it, and if you're able to just articulate what you did. But I do also just want to agree with the medical education, health policy stuff is other things that I did also And those can be PubMed indexed. It doesn't have to be like on a blog or anything like that. It can also be PubMed indexed, and you can get health policy stuff. If you're interested, email me or Instagram message me, and I can work with you on those things.
Yeah, I'll say, in addition to like that type of stuff as described, like, I think it depended like on the time point I was in medical school too. I mean, obviously, like, as I mentioned in the beginning, I started working on it like first year of medical school. So that's like a bigger timeline than versus if you, of course, decide like an M2 or M3 or and so forth. But, you know, like your busyness will definitely depend, like vary throughout medical school, right? So if you have more time, like I felt like in like some points of M1, you know, depending on how I was managing classes and so forth, like you have more time and stuff, like, so then during those periods of times I would try to do like larger projects, like retrospective chart reviews and things that are like a little more tedious and involved. But then when you're like really busy, like when you're in the hospital all day long and clinicals and stuff, then, you know, it's nice to do things like case reports, like things that it could be worked on virtually, especially things that could have a lot of virtual collaboration, maybe like a minimal chart review or other things of that nature, but like can predominantly be worked on online would be very nice, things of that nature. And then so like hard research, things like that, like clinically, I don't have any, like I did basic science like in undergrad a bit, but nothing like that in medical school. It was all strictly clinical, in clinical involvement for that.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely like quality over quantity. You know, it's better to have like a first or, you know, second author paper, even if it's just like a case series or a case report that you know really well, than kind of a bunch of publications that you were kind of superficially involved in. That said, I don't think, you know, you don't need to have 50 publications. You know, I would try and seek out some mentors in ophthalmology, see if they have any ongoing projects, see if it's something that is sort of at the end where you could kind of come in and write up data versus a project that's just starting. You know, so things to think about when you're trying to like optimize the best use of your time.
One little thing I'll add is one thing you can do is people that you're thinking about reaching out to, look at how active they are on PubMed over the last 3 to 5 years, and often those people that are very active, they'll have projects ready for you, and so you can kind of just hop on at the end for like the discussion section and intro and kind of fine tune things, and that can be an easy way for you to get into impactful projects. So look the people up on PubMed.
Thank you. I feel like you guys have done such a great job because you kind of answered a lot of the questions we have. So we will go to our research years becoming the new norm. What do you each think?
So I did not, oh, go ahead. You want to go? I could go, I guess. Okay, so I did not take a research year. But then again, I also like decided, quote unquote, in MS1. So I think it's, again, just like a timeline situation. If you kind of start to gear your application a little bit earlier on, then you really might not have to take a research year. It's very common, very, very common. There's nothing wrong with taking a research year. It's true, it does seem like a new norm in a lot of ways. But I guess like because I didn't take one, like I feel like you don't have to take one. You know, don't feel pressure just because like your classmates are taking one, the kids above you took a research year, your advisors are even telling you to take a research year. It doesn't actually necessarily mean you need a research year, even if your school advisors say so. I mean, you know, just it depends, you know, of course, just take everything that everyone says, including what I say, with a grain of salt. But ultimately, you have to come to like your own conclusion based on trying to look objectively at your application. Do you really need a research year, or can you, you know, apply and perhaps like statistically or whatever stack up to you know, have a good chance of matching?
Yeah, I agree with Gabby as well. I remember when I found ophtho and I was halfway through my rotation, I reached out to an ophthalmologist at a big institution. And I remember that the first thing she told me was that you need to take a research year. You go to a school that no one knows of. And I freaked out a little bit. And by the time I had that information, all of the research years for like third years, like a third year gap year, had already been filled. All of those positions have been filled. So I was at an impasse. I was like, do I take my own year and figure out what to do and have no money, or do I just go for it and then work hard between the end of third year and the beginning of fourth year to find ways to make my application stand out in other ways that like the research would have done. So it like Gabby said, it really depends on where you're at in your application. Is there other strengths that you think can pull up the weaker sides of your application, or do you feel like you need that research year to add it to a strength and kind of balance out your application a little bit more? But there is some really, really good research positions out there that are paid and that help a lot of applicants that want to do them. But also, I don't think it's 100% necessary for everyone without a home program to do a research year now, in my opinion.
I would say, yeah, try not to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think Dr. Ahmed just joined. If you would like to say hello, Dr. Ahmed, and then just jump in and feel free to answer any questions.
Dude, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm actually like on call, and I felt like I was not gonna have a crazy night. But I have one patient to take care of. Then I'm totally free. So I just want to let you guys know I'm super sad to like answer all your questions. I was not a crazy place call wise. I just today had one patient to see. But overall, I'll be there to ask or answer any questions, and then good chatting. So just give me like 5-10 minutes. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
For the research year stuff, like I didn't take a research year. One of my colleagues, one of my friends from my class, he wanted to do ortho, and his application was such that his research was pretty much zero, and his networking was pretty much zero, and his scores were like borderline. So in his specific case, like he deemed it a good idea to do it. So when he picked a research position, he picked a place where they produce a lot of research, like the head of the lab produces a lot of research as verified on PubMed, and it was paid, and they like guaranteed an interview, and he ended up matching it like one of the best ortho programs in the country. So I would look for a place like that. And then on the practical side of things, if for whatever reason you don't match or you're interested in research year, you can again slide in my DMs. I have in my institution, we have a paid research position where you'll get maybe like 5 to 8 publications depending on your kind of drive, and you'll get a guaranteed interview. But I would say, I hope it doesn't become the norm, because it's a gruesome to have to take another year to do like research. It's like we already have to do so much. So I hope it doesn't become the norm. But if you need it, I'm happy to help find you a place at my program or somewhere else.
Yeah, I would say I don't think a research year is absolutely necessary. That said, I did 3 years of neuroscience research before medical school. But I think, if you are considered doing the research year, an argument to do it would be not only to get publications, but you're also developing relationships with faculty, and those faculty, they, know people in the field. Ophthalmology is a very small world. So if you're looking, for a strong letter from somebody, it's definitely something to consider.
Thank you. For the sake of time, we'll now move to the questions around away rotations. What was your rubric or criteria for selecting your away rotations, and how many away rotations did you each do?
So Gabby and I's year, we were kind of restricted due to COVID restrictions, which made it also very challenging for us students that didn't have home programs. So I don't know what your situation was, but I was kind of able to finagle. We were only supposed to do 1 away rotation, but I pled my case saying that Florida State doesn't have a home program. I'm at a disadvantage here. Can I somehow do a second away rotation, one of which being a closer program in Florida that could be a pseudo home program? So I ended up doing 1 at a institution in Florida, and I loved it. I kind of used that one as my home ground. I met faculty, I got my letter of rec from there, and also was able to hop on some research last minute. So that was my criteria for my very first rotation. I needed something that was going to act as a pseudo home program in the span of 4 weeks. And then my next one, I really wanted to do some reach programs, because you never know, if you get in front of someone, you may not be the perfect applicant, but if you can impress them with your skills or just be a genuine person, they may like you and they may give you an interview. So I did a gamble and rotated at one of my top programs, which I ended up matching at. So I don't think without rotating at Georgetown, I would have had the opportunity to have interviewed here. So I always tell people, like, definitely go to a school or a program that you think could be a good home base that could help you get into the field of ophthalmology, but also reach for the stars. I would apply to some of your top 5 programs that you want to go to, whether that's location wise or just somewhere where you really want to be in terms of the program. So
yeah, if you guys are able, I would recommend doing, if you can, do 2 away rotations, and maybe if you have 2 places that you're interested in and you're more interested in one over the other, I would do the one you're more interested in towards the end. So the first one, because you're not really gonna, you guys don't really get exposure in medical school to the slit lamp and how to examine patients. And if you can get involved in doing that the first rotation, and then you go to your second one and you can see a patient independently, or at least try to and present that to the resident or the attending, that's good. Another thing you could do at each of these rotations, if there's a particular faculty member that you really like working with, ask them if they have a case report. You could write up something really fast. You could do like a JAMA challenge article, and submit it, try to get it in. I did that with both of my away rotations, just like a small publication for each. And even if it doesn't get accepted, you can still say, like, submitted, and can talk about it.
If you're a DO or you don't have a home program, I recommend you go to your program coordinator, you lock the door, you get a hammer, and you force them to give you the most amount of elective rotations you possibly can get. So I did 4 away rotations, and some of them were 2 weeks, some of them were 4 weeks. And I think if you're a DO, you're an unknown commodity to everybody, and you need to become a known commodity, and away rotations are a key way to do that. So try to squeeze your school to give you as many aways as you possibly can and fill up as many as you can. It is tiring, so just kind of be prepared for the long haul. And then I agree with putting your the most desired program at the end. That's what I did with Loma Linda, because I'm from here. I wanted to come back home. And then when you're there, definitely volunteer to do grand rounds, and volunteer to take call maybe like once or twice without being overbearing. And another thing that I did is when I was at Loma Linda, I would request a program coordinator to let me spend as many days with the program director and chair as possible on their clinic days. And so it's a little bit of a risk, but I think if you're a DO, you have to take some more risks. You can't be really safe, because we're so unknown that we have to become known. And some of these risks we have to take to give ourselves a good chance.
Yeah, I was in the same year as Kia, as she described, with this like very weird situation where we only had 1 away, which was like really weird and high pressure considering I had no home program. And yeah, but whatever. So I did my away at Cornell, and spoiler alert, I'm at Cornell. So yeah, so that worked out pretty good. But anyway, I would say what Kia said, how you should have like try to act it as a pseudo home program. This is kind of how I viewed it as well. You're like applying to away rotations, so it's not like you just like pick an away, like you apply and then they give you an invite and then you accept and stuff like that. And there's like this whole philosophy of like, you don't want to send too many, like you don't want to apply to too many and then reject too many and stuff like that. There's like a whole philosophy about that, because you don't want to leave a bad impression. So anywho, so like get a couple acceptances, whatever, and then strategically pick one that you think maximally, either one you want to go to, like would you legitimately want to go there, because obviously I think doing an away rotation at a program, they get to know you, so it helps you have a higher chance of really interviewing there, especially during this whole virtual interview season where it's so hard to get to know anyone. I would also say like think strategically, like this was a big thing for me, where to get your letters from. I thought that was actually the hardest thing out of this whole process, is like thinking of who writes your letters. Because without a home program, what am I gonna ask my PD, like my invisible program director? Like, no, there's no one to ask. So you have to figure out like who's writing your letters. So I got one on my way at Cornell, and then I had my research person write one. And then the third one, is like from a core clerkship and so forth. That's usually, I guess, the standard of what people do. But yeah, trying to like figure out who your ophtho letters could come from, that could be a little bit more tricky and nuanced. So I think away rotations, as best as you can, should fit in the realm of trying to figure out that aspect.
I'll also urge y'all to budget probably like 3,000 or so per away rotation. So do as many as you can, but know they are expensive.
Okay, now we'll move to our mentorship questions. How did you all establish and maintain a relationship with a mentor? And any advice on being an excellent mentee?
All of my mentors, so like I'm pretty like chill and laid back. I'm not really like traditional in the way I guess I am. And the ones that I've gained that have been great are the ones that kind of accept me for who I am. So I don't have to act like perfect around them. And I think that they really respected that portion of me and were willing to do whatever, needed to be done to help me out, especially since I didn't have a home program. And that really went a long way in just being genuine and being yourself, but also at the same time being respectful. So like as like a good mentee, like you want to also be there for when you're supposed to be there and be on time, and when you're in clinic, like basically being especially when you're trying to get to ophthalmology, a mentor is somebody who's going to vouch for you. So you want to be somebody that if they vouch for you, the people that they vouch for you for are going to know you're a great person and a great candidate. So they want to make sure you don't mess that up either.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say like I think it's more informal. Like all my mentors, I either reached out to someone who I wanted to connect with some sort of like proposition. I would say, for example, like I had an idea for a research project and wanted their involvement, like, you know what I mean? So I think it's like harder to kind of reach out to someone, which I think is fine. Like you could reach out to me or reach out to anyone. I think ophthalmology is a very kind community where you could say, can you be my mentor? And everyone's going to say yes. But the whole question is like, what is the meaning of that relationship, right? Like what happens next? Like what happens in that relationship? So I think it's easier to have it set in some inorganic, more like, I'm sorry, not inorganic, an organic way, like through research, or you met them at a conference and like at a social event or something, and then you have like particular questions, you have something relatable to them, like they went to your medical school, like something of that nature, just so it's a little bit more organic and makes sense of why you're trying to connect with them, and they could remember you and you could develop that relationship and keep in contact with them. So yeah, I would say a lot of my mentors were people in like a particular field, like kind of a particular area of ophthalmology that I really liked. Like I really like oculoplastics, like throughout medical school to some extent. So I did a lot of research in that. Or I had an idea for like opinion piece or medical education piece or something, and I wanted their input, like their specific input. So things of that nature, I think, are helpful to start to establish and maintain those mentor-mentee relationships.
Yeah, I would say I would try and reach out to multiple ophthalmologists. You never know who knows somebody or who might be able to help you and vouch for you. During my fourth year, there was a retina specialist that I actually reached out to in Charleston, South Carolina. I didn't get credit for it, but I just like went down there during one of my weeks off, and I like hung out in his clinic, and he got me doing like fluorescein angiograms and stuff. And I was just a med student, trying to figure out how to match in ophthalmology. It's something you kind of have to like you kind of have to be aggressive a little bit, and you kind of have to take advantage of all those opportunities and really reach out to people. But you'd be surprised, if you're reaching out and you show interest, like people will get you involved, you'll be able to do a lot,
We have some pre-med students on the call and even some M1s who may not be sold on ophthalmology yet. Why should they choose ophthalmology, and what do you love about your job?
The people, like, you will not meet a happier person in the hospital and in residency. Like, residency is kind of bad, but ophthalmology residents and ophthalmologists in general are just so happy, so willing to teach, so willing to take you under their wing and show you what a beautiful specialty it is. And it honestly it's the perfect mix of medicine and surgery and really cool technology. It's incredible. So if you want the perfect balance of medicine and surgery and also do a super niche thing that no one else can do, ophthalmology is definitely the field for you.
If you look at all those surveys, like those Medscape surveys, ophthalmologists are always like top 2 or top 3 and the happiest physicians, most likely to choose their career again, and least amount of time spent doing EMR. So the data backs that also.
Yeah, when I started gearing my application in M1 towards ophthalmology, I had my mind open all throughout medical school, and I really almost wanted something else to convince me, yeah, maybe I just preliminarily chose ophtho, but maybe something else is really for me. But I feel all throughout medical school, as I did more rotations and was in the hospital meeting more people in different subspecialties and so forth, everything just kind of validated that ophthalmology is the correct field for me. Yeah, you really can't go wrong, I think, with all factors. If you look at all the factors that a lot of people who are interested in this type of field look for, the surgical aspect, the medical aspect, patient impact, the community, the closeness of the community, so forth. It's the perfect mix.
Yeah, I think ophthalmology is an amazing specialty. I love the retina. There's something very beautiful about ophthalmology. It's a privilege to be able to look at the imaging that we are able to do. It looks like something that should be in the MoMA or the Met. There's an aesthetic quality to this specialty that I don't see in other specialties. There's also this balance of medicine and surgery that you're really not going to get in other specialties. And the surgeries are awesome. So, I'm doing a lot of cataract surgery, and it's exciting. It's fun. Yeah, you guys have all made the right choice. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't do OB, don't do neurosurgery. Sorry, OB, anyone who's thinking OB. No, actually, I really enjoyed OB. I love delivering babies, but I think, I think it is the best specialty, and ophthalmologists are some of the happiest physicians.
I agree. I truly believe ophthalmology is number one. Being on other rotations, going from medicine into ophthalmology, it's like a breath of fresh air, honestly, because you get so frustrated because you're not really doing much of anything. You're waiting around, but when you're in ophthalmology, you see a patient, you're actually making a difference, rather relatively quicker immediately for them, and they're very happy. There's not too many times which you don't have an answer for them. You're focused on one thing. There's clinic, there's surgery, and then sometimes patients just come in and just want to talk to you, and they're relatively grateful and happy to even be there and have you as a part of their care. And it's also something that really nobody else is touching. So you're the expert, right? If anybody has a problem or a question about something, it goes straight to you. And you really can't get that in too many other fields, which really makes me happy about it. So if you're looking for something like that, then I would say ophthalmology would be great for you. The people are great, very happy, and we love to have a great time. So it's number one.
I just wanted to say one other thing. When if and when you guys apply, I know there's a lot of talk about ophthalmology being a lifestyle specialty, and compared to like cardiothoracic surgery or something, it's definitely a better lifestyle. But during your interview, if someone asks you, why do you want to go into ophthalmology? I wouldn't say because I want a great lifestyle. Residency is hard, and you are going to be on call. You are going to have to deal with emergencies, even as an attending. So I think that I would, keep the focus on why you're passionate about the eye and why you want to pursue that as your specialty.
We are set to end at 9:15 Eastern time. However, if our panelists are willing to stay and if attendees are willing to stay, we're now going to open up the session for audience questions. Aaliyah is going to be monitoring our chat. So if you would like her to read your question aloud, please enter it into the chat box.
And with that being said, there is one question that was posed to the chat box. So the question states, does ophthalmology research or publications that are quality, so first author, count for residency interviews?
Yes, I think any sort of research that you do, whether it's first author or even you have your name on a paper, or it's not even a research paper like Gabby was talking about, if it's just an opinion piece, it all goes under the same section. Sure, you'll organize it in a different way with where your first author would go first and your lesser pieces would go last, but they all pretty much go in the same section on your application and will be the ones you talk about more during your interviews.
Florence.
Hi, I'm from Philadelphia. My name is Florence. I'm go to PCOM. So I'm kind of in the boat of I'm in my third year and I did my surgery rotations and I thought it was too much procedures, not enough patient interaction. And then I did my IM rotations and I thought it was too much patient interaction, not enough procedures. And I'm thinking ophthalmology is kind of the perfect specialty, but I'm afraid that it's too late at this point to kind of go that route. And any advice, like Kia, you were saying that you kind of grinded from the middle end of third year into the beginning of fourth year. What did you do to make yourself more competitive at that point?
So I did have some other stuff on my application from prior to me deciding that I wanted to do ophthalmology. So I took a step back and looked at what I already had on my application. I was on a few executive boards during M1 and M2 year that were internal medicine related. I did some basic science research and case reports that weren't related to ophthalmology. So when you go into your application, you will have to kind of like even in your personal statement, when you go through the process of how you found ophthalmology, your interviewers will realize that you were late to the game. Not everyone finds ophthalmology like early on or during undergrad. So as long as you explain that, they'll kind of see why your application doesn't have 100% of ophthalmology research or ophthalmology activities on it. But I had some extra time because of COVID during my third year. So on the weekends when I was on an elective, I would volunteer at my local Center for Blindness, and I would help teach some younger kids who were visually impaired how to use their walking sticks, and even just shoot photos and videos for the nonprofit's website. So I was kind of remotely involved in ophthalmology that way. And then I got on the tail end of a few projects. A lot of them didn't pan out, but the fact that they were started and I could talk about how I got involved in them as I started the application process and as I was going on a ways, that's how I was able to round out. I found ophtho. I was able to get involved between this time and this time. So don't feel like you need to put out a whole bunch of research right now. It's late in the game. Do what you can, but interviewers and application committees will understand if you kind of spell it out that, hey, like I loved everything. And then boom, ophtha was the 1/3 year. This is how I directed myself further down that path. So I hope that helps. But you can also email me if you want to go through some other options and stuff as well.
Okay, thank you. That was super helpful.
Correct me if I say your name incorrectly. Arelia?
Hi, yes, thank you. That was correct. Thank you to all the panelists for being here. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules for this. My question is about why ophthalmology. I agree to all those things that everyone said, why ophthalmology is such a great field. However, I've experienced and heard that some attendings or program directors want to know something more specific, and I've heard